I'm sorry to tell you, but we're actually at war over nuclear facilities, NATO bases, critical infrastructure, UFOs, possibly alien technology, are actually over our cities right now.
It really seems like these past 2 weeks, there's just been a plethora of civilian UFO videos.
My friend in New Jersey,
the
way before
big
everybody
one.
started talking about it, he's called me up. He's like, dude, I'm seeing these drones. They're so big. He goes, they're the size of SUVs.
With New Jersey, there's been at least 1,000 people recorded drones in the sky. Some of them look a little suspect,
Right.
but there's others that are just like, they're literally just sitting there, and they're just kind of like doing this, and then there's like 3 of them.
If they are drones, what are you guys doing? Are you surveilling us now?
Yeah, why is the FBI being like, we're gonna investigate it? It's if they're drones, like,
Wouldn't
if
you know?
that are the size
Yeah.
of cars, you should probably figure that out pretty quick, you know?
In our airspace.
That's the weirdest thing. If you're asking me what they're doing, they're collecting data on how people are going to react to this.
I think so
Yeah.
too.
I mean,
How are
smart.
people going to react to seeing something in the sky that they can't explain?
Stop. That's what we're being told, but is it true? Well, it's very economical with the truth. We are at war, we're at hybrid war, but it's probably not aliens. Hey folks, welcome back. 2025. I told you it was going to be a momentous year, a year where we actually have alien technology proof, where we know that we're not alone in the universe. We begin to understand the true nature of consciousness, reality, and the fact that UAP are global, are real. Cryptoid creatures, ghosts, demons, and poltergeists are all here. You're sitting in a room right now, watching this, I hope, surrounded by dead people, but you're not aware of it. There are aliens in the sky above your house. So let's use that to confuse the public. Let's use the UFO card to tell a lie. Let's get you, very good UFO investigators, off our back by playing the UFO card. It would be fascinating if airports over Belgium, married quarters of the RAF in the UK, and the airspace over New Jersey was actually being invaded by aliens with shape-shifting UFOs. But it's a different type of war. It's a hybrid war. It's a test by Russia to clearly demonstrate weakness, to object, to cause chaos, to NATO countries supporting Ukraine. All right. So YouTube, social media is full of stories about UFOs flying over nuclear facilities, airports, and critical infrastructure in the West. Hang on, they're only flying over Belgium, Denmark, Germany, United Kingdom, maybe some places in France, which has been poorly reported, and the United States. What have those countries all got in common? Oh, they're all supporting Ukraine in their fight against the Russian invasion. Who would be upset? Oh, no, maybe Russia would be upset. Here's a piece of news that you don't know. A piece of news that really just didn't get into the UFO community. After the incursions into NATO airspace in the UK, specifically Lakenhall, Mildenhall, and the married quarters of wives and children, not at an Air Force base, of RAF pilots in Britain by these unknown drone things, arrests were made. MI5, slow horses. I don't know who did it. Fact, Eastern European nationals with UK residence were arrested in cars in East Anglia by local police working with MI5. When interrogated, they admitted they were paid or coerced, which is very nasty, to fly these special not geofenced Russian hobby-style drones, specifically in the East Anglian region. These people came from West London. They were paid money. They were given special non-geofenced drones. You have to remember that Ukraine invested into the drone technology as a cheap but very smart way of countering the Russian invasion. Since then, Russia have now got into drone technology, and both these sides are having this drone war. The drones that they're using are large. They are not geofenced. They're not made by DJI or whatever they're called. They can do what they want with them. These drones are very sophisticated. The fiber optic ones have a horrible environmental impact, with maybe over a mile of cable being strewn over Ukrainian forests, because it's a way of not being able to shoot down a drone by electronic EMP denial systems, if they're just wire controlled or fiber optic controlled. So both Russia and Ukraine have sophisticated drones. Russia have invested heavily in it, and what they demonstrate is that they're immune to conventional warfare. They are what's called by warfare people hybrid war, and that's what they were demonstrating in the UK, in Denmark, in Germany, in the United States. They're not flying saucers. Their mission was to put the willy up the West. Sorry, folks, that's my silly catchphrase, but I think it pretty well sums it up. And this isn't the first time that we in the UFO community have been tricked. So dust off your keyboards, keyboard warriors, and start yelling at me, the bogus professor, in the comments, where I tell you some horrid truths about how UFOs have been used to trick and confuse you for government disinformation. Now, it's a very clever technique, because you and I want to know the truth. We want disclosure. UAP are global. UAP are real. And we're not being told the truth. So let's abuse the UFO community. So the military and your government are using you, abusing you, very much in this case. And there is a history of that. So get your fingers ready, folks, because I'm going to tell you how you're being tricked. So let's go back to Roswell. A secret spy mission over Russia. The State Department absolutely hated it. It was illegal. An advanced metallic military payload floated over Russia illegally to listen and record nuclear tests. It used very advanced equipment. It was high-flying and lightweight, and sadly a lot of them crashed. But the strangest thing that it needed was a battery that could work 100,000 feet in freezing temperatures for over a month. I think I've found that battery manufacturer, SAFT, in France. They provided all the rechargeable batteries for the Mustang, the P-51, the B-29 bomber in World War II, every one handmade and smuggled out of France during German occupation. SAFT were and still are the world's leading aerospace battery manufacturer. Back in the 1940s, they built a battery that could be frozen, high-powered, and last for weeks using bismuth and aluminium alloys. They still produce them today for satellites and military applications. Almost every airplane, every commercial airplane in the world uses SAFT technology. That's probably what crashed. That's probably the stuff that's been recovered. Strange alloys, maybe made in France. But no, it was a flying saucer to shut up the public. The second story was the F-117 being tested for radar compatibility and stealth at Albuquerque at Kirtland Air Force Base. The frequencies were picked up by Paul Benevitz in his ham radio setup in Albuquerque. He contacted Kirtland and was told it was a flying saucer being tested to shut him up. He went home, and sadly he went mad. And then in Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, meddling humans unleashed real UAPs, real cryptoid creatures that have been there for generations, by doing something with physics and covering up the story by telling you today that it was aliens, triangular craft, and flying saucers. Stories from witnesses who were injured, hypnotized, drugged, threatened, and coerced to tell you they were aliens. And even today, we have films and books and people talking about flying saucers, when in fact, it's a cover story. The very first piece of information that reached the press after Charles Holt's memo came out was UFO invades Suffolk. And that's what you're getting today, folks. Flying saucers over New Jersey. Alien craft seen over Belgium. It's not true. Boats, Russian Shadow Fleet ships have been arrested in the Baltic. A small ship was arrested in German canal system. The French, brilliantly, actually apprehended a Russian ship off the Bay of Biscay, all with drone launching facilities. We are at war. We're in a hybrid war, but we're in a war with a country that wants to put the willy up the West. These Russian drones, either flown by bad actors in the country that they're launched from, or from the Russian Shadow Fleet, are at war with us today. They're not flying saucers. So, Nick Pope, I think possibly what's happened in the last 10 days is egregious. It's terrible. I think it's deeply worrying that British airspace has been abused by an unknown power, by something. I think the MOD, NATO, the US Air Force bases have proved to be rather vulnerable to unconventional threats. How bad do you think these craft, and we'll talk about what they might be in a minute, how bad do you think this event has really been?
It has been bad. There has been actual disruption, and with the military, everything is about the operational imperative. And there's no getting away from the fact that operations have been impacted by this, because people have taken their eye off the ball, literally and metaphorically, perhaps, and self-evidently resources that should be going on to core defense business have had to be diverted onto this because of a failure of defense. I mean, one of the tantamount principles of defense is the territorial integrity of United Kingdom airspace. And that's been compromised by something. As you say, the question of what it is a second order question.
Yeah.
The first order issue is that our airspaces have been and are being breached by something.
I think whatever it was in the sky above the bases, there was unconventional, and their conventional weapon, base security and defense systems. I mean, if it was a drone or if it was a UAP or whatever it was, F-16s or British assets or even base security didn't seem to cope with it. What do you think actually was going on? Why was it so badly handled, or was it?
Part of it is a mindset issue. There is still, both at the Ministry of Defense and in the military, this sort of old-fashioned land, sea, air mentality that everything will be all right because we've got radar systems, and if anything comes in, we'll be able to detect it. If we need to, we'll scramble the jets on quick reaction alert. But that's old school thinking. Sure. Now, in these days of asymmetric warfare, and with the importance of drones and small unmanned aircraft systems, we are in a new reality. The reality of defense nowadays should be outer space, cyberspace, and drones. And yet we're still on ships, planes, and tanks, and infantry. And now all of these can play a role, but you have to configure to the world as it is, not as you might think it should be, or as it was a few decades ago.
Well, let's get on to the more sticky question of what was it? I mean, I think, well, first of all, you and I are a certain age where we know and remember a phrase, useful idiots, something that you've very much come across. Organizations like CND and Marxist organizations often had an agenda where they thought by handing over MOD kind of spy secrets like cruise watch in Berkshire, following cruise missiles, whatever it was, would be useful for their cause. But they didn't realize, innocently probably, didn't realize that that information was going direct to Moscow. Do you think there's a connection in what we're seeing in Britain today? Because is it possible? I mean, I'm prattling on here. Do you think these incursions possibly could have had a Russian origin? And if so, how did they do it?
Some of them could have a Russian origin. And there's no getting away from the fact that if you look at the dates when this all ramped up and you compare it to exactly when the UK authorized the use of long-range UK-supplied munitions like Storm Shadow to Ukraine for use against Russian territory, and that's the critical point. The dates match up, so that at the very least is a strong potential connection and therefore a theory. Look, I don't think there is a single neat solution to all these different incursions, because of course this is not just at one particular base. It's multiple installations, and it's not just UK, it's going on in the US as well. So the idea that there's one explanation for everything and that once we hit that answer, it's going to explain the whole lot, I don't think that's the case. Like the UFO mystery, some of it is, for example, misidentification of things like Chinese lanterns. Some of it isn't. Yeah. So in definitions, everything in the sky that you can't initially identify could be categorized as a UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena in modern parlance. Sure. But some of those will turn out to be hobbyist drones, and some of them may well turn out to be adversary drones or SUAS, and some may even turn out to be a sort of mass hysteria. Now this has got so much public and media attention. It's like every time someone sees a Starlink satellite, they're probably going to be reporting this.
I'm going to push you on the seriousness of this. The one thing that absolutely made me really take a deep intake of breath was when anomalous objects, drones or whatever they are, were seen over married quarters of MOD personnel, the actual pilots and their families. I mean, isn't that very emblematic of somebody sending a very direct signal to Britain and the MOD?
Yes, it could be. And of course, in military terms, very often killing, if we're going to put it this way, killing or injuring pilots or other critical kind of operators of key systems is going to do more damage militarily than, for example, blowing up an aircraft, because you've got plenty of aircraft dispersed in storage, whatever, but your pool of the men and women skilled enough to operate these, that's a much smaller pool. So you always look for the area where the smallest kind of attack can get you the biggest return. You're vulnerable, and sometimes that's physical. There is critical national infrastructure, whether it's certain oil and gas refineries or whether it's communications nodes. Undersea cables is getting a lot of attention at the moment, and rightly so. But sometimes it's your personnel. Yeah, I mean, some of the key operators are very valuable. And of course, there's the psychological message too. It's one thing to threaten infrastructure. It's quite another, particularly in a Western nation like ours, where human life is maybe worth a little bit more than it's worth, say, in the Russian meat grinder that they're throwing everything into in Ukraine. And it does send a message. And so the question does arise. Could some of this be espionage, in advance, not espionage for espionage's sake?
Right.
I mean, Putin has made it very clear.
Mm-hmm.
He has said that he will regard, NATO nations that aid direct attacks on Russian soil as now being a legitimate target because they've entered a war against Russia. And so Putin has put down a marker saying, I believe I am within my rights to attack. And that includes, of course, bases that he might feel are directly contributing to Ukraine's war, which has now brought the struggle to Russian territory, for example, in the Kursk area. Now, they're not going to do this themselves.
Right.
I want to, and this is why your point about useful idiots is really on point. For any Russian in the UK, your declared intelligence officers, but above all, your illegals, are your most prized assets. So you're not going to find some Spetsnaz person. What you might find is a local hobbyist,
right,
who's been told, like CND, like your example on CND, hey, I'm a news agency. We're looking for some really good footage of the bases. Here's a drone. Fly it over, get some footage, we'll pay you. What that person doesn't realize is that's going back to Moscow Center.
Yeah. No, I think it's quite likely. I mean, just the physical practicality of a team of, if it is Russians, of a team of Russians entering Britain with drones or flying them, people are saying flying them over the North Sea and down the Wash. No, I mean, I think it's impractical. I think it's much more likely that it's bad actors in the UK that were either coerced, maybe Eastern European nationals living in the UK, or paid purely to do a mission. But Nick, one of the things in the idiots game, when you were in CND or you were flying a drone over Gatwick Airport, you were going to make a point about, say, an environmental project that you wanted to publicize, and you were going to claim, this is a key point, claim responsibility. Nobody has claimed responsibility for these incursions into Lakenheath, Mildenhall, and all over Britain. Is that not an enormous sign that responsibility does not need to be claimed because we sent you the effing message? The message was very clear to the MOD and British government that we can do this and you are vulnerable.
Yes, I think there's something to that. I mean, the first point I would make is that both the Ministry of Defence and the civil police have made it very clear that they are treating this as a criminal investigation, and that if they identify anyone responsible for any of this, they will seek to prosecute them. So for the hobbyists, whether they're just doing it on their own initiative or whether unbeknownst to them, they are acting as useful idiots and they're actually fronting for the Russians, that may well have scared some people into silence and may have stopped some of them. But the incursions are going on still, so it seems. It does send a message.
I was kind of slightly predicting that the message was very successful, the vulnerability was demonstrated, and also you're going to lose some of your idiots, useful idiots, and somebody's going to be one of them's going to be caught, and it's all going to come out how they were hired, if that's what happened. Nick, I didn't realize that there are still sightings specifically in UK airspace. I mean, like today, the last few days, it's still things have been.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything today, but of course
Right.
I'm speaking to you from the US, and there's a time difference. But I'm following this
Yeah.
closely,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure it's stopped. And even if it has, it's certainly we don't have any resolution of
No.
this.
No. I kind of feel that we're not going to get it resolved. And that brings me on to the other unresolved issue of UAP and the UFO community, who are so adamant that it's not drones. They don't like the word drones. It's the swamp gas of 2024, and they are linking sightings correctly, UAP sightings. UAP are real. We know that. Thank you, the Content Report. I mean, all over the world. And I don't think we should ever lump UFO, UAP sightings together. I mean, do you think there's any possible connection between the drone or the sightings that have been seen in the US and elsewhere in the world and what's been happening in Cambridgeshire?
There could be. Again, it comes back to the point that there isn't going to be a neat single answer to this. And it could be that multiple things are going on. Some hobbyist, some adversary, some maybe genuinely anomalous. But I think the UFO community is making a mistake by betting the farm on this. And I think that it's just as I had said some years ago, don't bet the farm on those 3 US Navy videos, because all it takes is for them to say, actually, we've explained one or all of those. And then it's like it pulls the rug out from under their collective feet. And that is a danger. You don't ever want to bet the farm on anything, I would suggest. And to say that all of this is potentially extraterrestrial is I think unhelpful, because clearly a lot of it is going to turn out to be something quite mundane, serious, but mundane.
I actually think in the last 10 days, you and I have lived through one of the worst airspace incursions in the UK. I mean, bears over the North Sea were very much, scrambled against, but actually, a drone in NATO base, an unknown vehicle in the sky. I think it's terrifying, and I think the UFO community, by trying to explain it with a single word, it's aliens, it is very foolish, because I think we're living in dangerous times.
We are. And I've been accused of debunking all this, and I am not saying,
right.
I am not, I'm not ruling out the extraterrestrial hypothesis for some of this, but I'm saying, come on, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, and it's quite clear that a lot of this is drones or SUAS, however you categorize this. And we've only got to see those videos coming out of Ukraine of multi-million-dollar tanks, effectively destroyed, and the crew killed or injured, or certainly forced to evacuate by little more than a grenade strapped to the underside of a drone that you can buy for a few dollars. And that is the modern nature of warfare, and it's fundamentally changed. And so defense against that is critical. Now, I don't normally comment on special forces matters, but you will have seen in the media reports that some plane trackers, some people have tracked some movements between let's just say various bases where special forces operate from, and it's perfectly possible that these special forces are now deployed in effectively an anti-drone capacity. But again, it's a capability gap. There are all sorts of ways you can bring down drones, and it ranges from shotguns
Right.
and actually, it sounds surreal, but birds of prey, especially Chinese
Yeah.
birds of, to something a little bit more scientific and technological, like
Right.
EMP weapons.
Exactly.
But obviously, that brings us to the point that the one way to get resolution of at least some of this is to bring one or more of these things down. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, A, that is being attempted, and B, I'm pretty sure that probably it's been managed. But because whatever you're dealing with, you don't want to let on too much about countermeasures. How good is your base security? How good is your counter
Right.
drone? You know,
Right.
when people say, when you hear official spokespeople say, "Oh yeah, we still haven't found one of these things," I'm sort of thinking,
You're going,
well, maybe.
maybe. The United Kingdom airspace has been invaded. I think it's very serious. Where do we go from here?
We have to have a proper inquiry. It has to be modeled on what happened when we realized that Chinese spy balloons were coming here, and that because of this sort of lazy, bureaucratic, closed-minded, it can't be so it isn't
Right.
mindset on UAP, we'd either not reported these sorts of things or not taken them seriously. Well, we have to learn from that, apply it to this current situation, and then we have to do a gap analysis.
Yeah.
And we have to say, what have we missed?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we plug those gaps so that what's happened recently over some of the most critical and strategically important locations in the UK doesn't happen again? So it's all about gap analysis and risk mitigation.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't be fighting yesterday's war. I mean, we have to wake up. And I mean, in the balloon thing in the United States, looking for incoming ballistic missiles and filtering out balloons, Cessnas, and birds, missed the damn balloon. We have to have the base security, and we need to actually wake up to the modern age. If they aren't doing it, as you say, I really hope for Britain's sake that that they are as protected as possible.
Well, I hope so, but it's an attitudinal thing. We've got very good technology and we've got very good people. You know, whether it's the Ballistic Missile Early Warning Center at Fylingdales, whether it's Space Fence, whether it's satellite systems, whatever it is. But if you have that mindset, it can't be so it isn't. You don't even get to the data. I had a very good example of this. I went to Fylingdales some years ago. And I got a briefing, and they said something like, "Oh, occasionally we see fireball meteors come across here, and of course we ignore them." I said, "How do you know they're fireball meteors?" And the guy said, "Well, because they go very fast. What else could they be?" And I said, "There's your problem.
There's your problem,
it's the
mate.
mindset, not the kit."
Right. Oh, that's interesting. So ignoring super fast as well as ignoring super slow is a bit...
everyone. And it's worse than that, because that mindset, as you know, then gets translated into filter programs that filter out anything that doesn't behave like something you're expecting. So all an adversary has to do is design something that behaves in an unexpected way, and they can exploit the gaps that you yourself have left because of your kind of attitude.
I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but that bubble needs to be burst. They're not flying saucers. Somebody is putting the willy up the west. Disagree in the comments below, because the truth needs to be out there.